For those of you who do not know me, my name is Chelsea. I'm going to be one of the speakers, myself and Michael Elmore here, and Frank George, and my husband John Rohn. We're going to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, let's listen to what Michael Elmore has to say.
Thank you. Well, nice gathering of racist, bigoted, xenophobic Islamophobes. You probably heard that a time or two from family members and loved ones. My name is Mike Elmore, and I'd like to thank Frank George and the Chelseas for giving me the opportunity and inviting me here to come to speak. I'd also like to throw out a little thanks to our founding fathers who made what I'm about to say able to say, and maybe more important, for you to have the right to hear it. I'm here to explain why I believe America and Islam cannot coexist. To see this, all you have to do is read Islam's holy book, the Quran, and study the Sunnah. Those are the sayings and the traditions of Muhammad. As Sun Tzu said, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you will not fear the results of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Right now, we do not know the enemy, that's Islam. I question whether we even really know ourselves. To rectify this, I'm going to take you on a crash course on who Muhammad was, the history and the goals of Islam, and how this all ties into the threat of Islam today, so that we at least may know our enemy. So who was Muhammad? Muhammad's full name was Muhammad ibn Abdullah. He was born in Mecca, which is currently in Saudi Arabia, in 570 AD. At the time, Mecca was a very holy place and the center of many religions. Most Arabs were pagans, not beholden to the idea of one God. Muhammad's father died before he was born. His mother died when he was 5. He was handed over to his grandfather, who also died. He was finally raised by his uncle, Abu Talib, who was a very powerful and influential man of nobility in the Quraysh tribe. Their main business at the time was making money on the different religions in the area, providing them with the necessary items for worship, like doves, incense, money changing, lodging. When he grew up, Muhammad was hired by a wealthy widow named Khadija, who ran a trading business throughout the Middle East. Muhammad managed her caravans. Although illiterate, he was considered quite savvy in business. Khadija eventually proposed marriage, and they had 6 children. When around 40 years old, Muhammad began to have visions and taking long retreats in a cave. He claimed to have had a vision, including a vision by the angel Gabriel. Because Muhammad could not read or write, Gabriel instructed him that he must recite the word of Allah and repeat it to his followers. These were known as the scriptures, and later were written down in the Quran, which means to recite. His new religion was called Islam, which means submission. His wife was his first convert, followed by many others. So in the beginning, Muhammad did teach tolerance and peace. Muhammad incorporated many of the characters in the Bible, such as Abraham, Moses, and Jesus in his story, and claimed that they were all Muslims. Muhammad himself was the final prophet and the central figure of Islam, and his goal was to make the whole world worship him and Allah. Muslims do believe Jesus existed, but he was only a prophet. He never died on the cross, and he certainly wasn't the Son of God. Obviously, Muhammad's interpretation was never going to cut it with the Christians or the Jews. Muhammad believed that his creation, Islam, was the only right religion. At the time when had been teaching Islam and it was peaceful, he became increasingly intolerant of other religions. But he continued to preach and gained more followers. They called themselves Muslims, which means one who submits. His tolerance began to fuel more bickering back and forth between the Quraysh tribe and the other pagan religions. After all, this was not in the best interest of Mecca's economy. The tribe pleaded with him to be more tolerant. He refused, and it got so bad that the community, along with his uncle, asked him to leave. He'd been preaching in Mecca for 13 years, had about 150 disciples when he declared himself a prophet. Being forced out of Mecca, he went on into Medina, where there were 5 major tribes, 3 Jewish, 2 Arabs. Muhammad was able to convince the Arabs to convert, but the Jews again resisted. Muhammad then became ruthless to those that didn't convert, the unbeliever, the kafir, the infidel. So in Mecca, when writing the Quran, it started off more peaceful, tolerant, but when he met resistance in Medina, his teachings become more political, militant, and theocratic. The later writings contained the verses, violent verses, which we hear the extremists quote today. A couple of those, and this is just a few of them. I'm sure most of you have heard these. And slay them wherever they come upon you. Take not yourselves from them until they immigrate in the way of Allah. If they turn their backs, take them away, slay them whenever you find them. Take not of yourself any one of them as friends or helpers. This is recompense for those who fight against Allah and His messenger and hasten about the earth to do corruption. They shall be slaughtered or crucified, or their hands and feet shall alternately be struck off. This is 9:5. And then when the sacred months are drawn away, slay the infidel, slay the adulterer wherever you find them, and take them and confine them, and wait in line at every place of ambush. 9:29. Fight those who believe not in Allah. 47:4. When you meet the unbeliever, smite their neck. Then when you have made wide slaughter among them, fasten their bonds. These are the verses of the sword. Proponents of Islam today try and ignore these. They point to the numerous verses which admonish violence and advocate peace and tolerance and compromise. So how do they reconcile these two differences? Now this is critical to understand because there's something called the doctrine of abrogation. And to understand, and this is to understand where the violence and how it's justified in the Quran. Abrogation means to end or cancel something in a formal and official way. The term abrogation in the Quran means that Allah chose to replace peaceful earlier verses in the Quran for more later violent verses. The central verse that deals with this abrogation is Surah 2:106. Now, Muslim scholars, this is something that's been going on for 1,400 years. Muslim scholars such as Ibn Salama, he died in 1020, agreed that the verses of the sword have abrogated some 124 more peaceful Meccan verses, including every other verse in the Quran which condemns or implies anything less than total offense against the non-believers. To keep it simple, all you have to know are that the verses written in Mecca were all thrown out the window when Muhammad got to Medina. The violent verses supersede the peaceful ones. And the only way you can figure this out is that apparently Allah got it wrong the first time. So after consolidating in his power in Medina and his followers swear allegiance to him, Muhammad developed a set of laws called Sharia, which means pathway to be followed, and defined most how Muslims versus non-Muslims are to be treated. And just here are a few of Sharia's laws. Criticizing or denying any part of the Quran, Muhammad or Allah is punishable by death. This is blasphemy. Changing one's religion from Islam and becoming a non-Muslim is punishable by death. This is apostasy. A man may marry an infant girl and consummate that marriage when she's only 9 years old. And by the way, this is what Muhammad was busy doing at the time. This we call child rape. A man could strike his wife for insubordination. That's spousal abuse. These are just a few, but the list goes on and on. So prior to moving to Medina, Muhammad had not used violence, but now that he had been gaining power and followers, he had become violent and waged war with the tribe of Mecca and those who didn't believe in his religion and convert. He began attacking and plundering the caravans for their goods in the name of God. He cut 20% for himself and gave the rest to his followers, who began to multiply with the prospect of vast riches. This was the start of jihad, which contrary to Western myth is not some spiritual journey. Jihad means holy war. Muhammad developed the rules of jihad, which of course were given to him by Allah and sanctioned by Allah. And that would be anything that advances Islam or weakens the non-Muslim. That's terror, coercion, killing, torturing, raping, assassinating, or lying. It's all okay as long as it advances Islam. Just to show Muhammad's level of brutality, after conquering the Bana Quraysh tribe, Jewish tribe, this was known as the Battle of Trench, he beheaded all men and 700 boys past puberty, 700 of them, in front of their mothers, wives, and children, whom he had taken for slaves and sex slaves. Now, I just challenge anyone to make any argument that this behavior was peaceful at any time in history and could be sanctioned as a religion. Muhammad lived to be around 55 years old and died from suspected poisoning from one of his captive Jewish wives. At the time of his death, Islam had taken over all of Saudi Arabia, parts of northern Africa, and was moving into India and Persia. Now, we've been told by politicians, religious leaders, professors, military, security experts, media, and even our last two presidents, that the terrorist attacks that we've recently experienced are not Islamic and have nothing to do with Islam. That somehow Islam has been hijacked, misrepresented, or bastardized. And I would suggest to you that everything ISIS, the lone wolves, and all the other Islamic terrorists do, raping, torturing, murdering, bombing, trading in the sex slave, is exactly what Muhammad personally did. And the scary part about this, there's 91 surahs in the Quran that state Muhammad is the perfect person for everyone to emulate. This is their dogma. These facts are indisputable. So when you have friendly Muslims say this is a religion of peace and has been hijacked, I contend that they are the ones that have truly hijacked Islam. If they don't stand with Muhammad's Islam, they will be considered apostates and be killed under Sharia law. I call them Jack Muslims, and it's not their Islam, it's Muhammad's Islam that will be followed. This is why you don't and you never will see any major movement to reform the Quran or the Islam. A recent Pew poll found 25% of American Muslims believe in some type of Sharia law. And 26 of Muslim men under 30 think ISIS is doing the right thing. That's in the United States. Make no mistake about it, the moderate Muslim is Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, Boko Haram, Hamas, ISIS, and Hezbollah. The radical Muslims are those that claim to be peaceful. Radical defined means breaking away from the fundamentals. ISIS is following the fundamentals of Islam to the T. Just exactly what Muhammad preached and practiced. I cannot overemphasize this point. Muhammad was a bad man, not some peace-loving prophet to be revered, venerated, and worshipped. So now that we understand just a little bit about Islam, the enemy, it's time to know ourselves, if we possibly can. We have a justice system whose key principle of private property, freedom of action, freedom of speech, and secular but God-inspired government created to facilitate, not suppress, individual freedom. This made great things happen in this country like no other place on the earth, and it wasn't by accident. Islam condemns these ideas and instead imposes a fanatical, totalitarian ideology that has no room for dissent or separation of church and state. Our founding fathers knew and understood this weakness and danger of democracy in the wrong hands. Unfortunately, so do our enemies. In 1991, the Muslim Brotherhood laid out the agenda for America in a memorandum stating, Muslims must understand their work in America is kind of a grand jihad in eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands so that God's religion is made victorious over all religions. Coupled with the Muslim Brotherhood's founder, Hassan al-Banna, who said, it is in the nature of Islam to dominate, not to be dominated, and to impose its laws on all nations and to extend its powers to the entire planet. Now, this is the same Muslim Brotherhood who has access to the White House, advises our president, his administration, and our military. Muhammad also said, I charge you with 5 of what Allah has charged me with, to assemble, to listen, to obey, to immigrate, to wage jihad for the sake of Allah. This comes from a saying found in the Hadith. Muhammad practiced using immigration for that cause. It's called the hijrah. So the current fighting in the Middle East has been a huge boon for the Muslim immigration in the West. They play on our sympathies, we are being kind, and they only use our kindness as one of the tools to do what Muhammad charged them to do with. The bad part about this is most Americans, including our leaders, don't even have the wit to understand that they're being played.
The sad part is they don't even care. The worst part is, this is even being too kind, they refuse to know the truth. It's willful ignorance at this point. So in trying to know ourselves, I would say first we have become blind, stupid, and naive. Blind, stupid, and naive. A nation of weaklings needing safe zones on college campuses where someone can be protected and not offended by hearing the truth. Our cultural softness has led us today as all blame, no shame, taking no responsibility culture. When Bob Dole was running for president, he summed it up best. Shame has no longer become a motivational factor in America. We have no shame. We do anything for money, and we'll get into bed with anybody that has that money, even if they've threatened to kill us. This is really something. After all, don't do anything that might hurt someone's feelings and lower their self-esteem. The lack of knowledge about our history taught in schools, being made to feel guilty over our American exceptionalism, the progressive liberal idea of moral, cultural, and religious relativism has got to stop. Saying no one is any better, no one is any worse is nonsensical. Because if no one is wrong, how can you define right? Well, you can't. Liberals are not going to make me feel guilty. Leftists criticize as bigots and racists those who went to war to defend the right to criticize. Those people, the right to criticize. I read once that we have evolved, the United States that is, has evolved past the point that we can no longer retain the basic instinct of survival. Life has become too easy. Unfortunately, our tolerance of the intolerance and dumbing down of America while allowing Muslims to flood into this country and practice their religion is not going to end well. All you have to do is look at the Middle East. They manipulate the freedom that we have generously given them to impose Islamic doctrine right here on our soil. Seriously, we have Muslim prisoners demanding to grow beards and change prison menus to support their beliefs. Schools teaching Islam, taking hot dogs off the school menu, private businesses, private military schools changing their dress code to accommodate Muslim religious garb and giving Muslims special time off during work to pray and also a place to do it. Give me a break. In some places, we don't even let our students say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore, let alone pray in school. We don't want to offend someone. Hell, we can't even call it Christmas or Easter holiday any longer. Now, we don't give the Mormons the right to practice polygamy, but be rest assured that will soon change. Not because Mormons particularly want it, but because Muslims will demand it. Just to prove that they can do it whether we like it or not. This is all about Islamic supremacism. Well, personally, I'm getting kind of tired of it, and I'm getting kind of offended. And not only at the Muslims, but by the Americans who have allowed this kind of madness to continue. Isn't it ironic that as you and I stand here today, worrying about and wondering about where our freedoms and where we're going to, our protection and our culture is going, even for some of those whose behavior that I personally do not believe in, like the gays, transgenders, feminists, and abortions, we are the ones who are hated and called haters. Make no mistake, these groups won't last 5 minutes in an Islamic world. So let's kill the messenger, let's shut him up, and let's call him names. This makes a lot of sense. In America today, we truly are sacrificing critical thinking at the altar of political correctness and cowardness. I think it's safe to say we've been getting a taste of that Islamic culture over the last few years. Multiculturalism, ain't it rich and yummy? Don't you just love it? So what can we do about it? Right here's what we can do about it. You being here is what we can do about it. I want to thank again Frank and the Rowans for inviting me here by putting on this event, because I know it takes a lot of courage. It's easy to protest. It's easy to try to prove that you're right, and when people don't want to hear what you have to say. Although I may not share your sentiments in burning the Quran, I believe you have the right to do it. I just feel that maybe it overshadows a larger, more important issue about Islam and may turn people away. There's a discussion and a debate to be had here. We have the facts. We have truth on our side. We just need people to hear it. Like a Marine friend of mine said, read it, man, don't burn it. What people need to do and understand, and this completely, totally escapes the left, this is all about religious freedom. Because Islam doesn't give you the same religious freedom and equality under their law. And we cannot give that same protection under the First Amendment to a group that hides under the veneer of religion but actually wants to destroy you. So what's so hard to see about this? Well, it's not. But first you have to quit hiding behind the political correctness, lose your fear of being called a racist and a bigot, and believe that what I'm saying is true. And that's the problem. People go along to get along. They bury their head in the sand. It's easier for someone else to do it. We do have to get more involved politically. Run for office, any office. Try to get on different boards throughout the city and county. Run on the ticket that opposes refugee resettlement in Wyoming. This is really important. We need to start into political battles and be unapologetic about our position. There's no other way to win this, because if we can get people educated and we can get them in a position of power, we may have a chance. We have to identify Islam for what it is. A political ideology that seeks our destruction, not a religion that should be enjoy the protection of religious freedom provided by the First Amendment. Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free expression thereof. You get no free expression thereof under Islam. It's their way or the highway. Islam is not a religion. It's a theocratical, militant, social, cultural, identified by the Quran, the Sunnah, and the Hadith, and implemented under Sharia law to replace or subjugate everything non-Muslim, to spread Islam across the globe. What faith-based religion would make blasphemy and apostasy a capital offense? I believe that Sharia violates the primary federal sedition statute, Chapter 18, U.S. Code, Section 2385, advocating the overthrow of government. Because Sharia's main purpose is that goal. And is defined by Islam, submission. It seeks to establish its laws through any and all means, including violence worldwide. This has been a universal consensus among authoritative Sharia scholars throughout Islam's 1400-year history. Islam's doctrine of jihad is foundational. It's based on explicit verses in the Quran. Jihad must be waged until the infidel and the polytheist are converted, subjugated, or murdered. Jihad is warfare by any and all means. It includes violence, political manipulation, propaganda, psychological warfare, and just downright lying. I've read the apologist's reasoning that Sharia is compatible with Western values and is not a threat. And this is total bullshit. It only works if everyone is Muslim. So in the meantime, there's going to be a whole lot of killing of non-Muslims by Muslims until we get to that point. Under Islam, you must convert. The only other choice is to die or to become a second-class citizen. This latter condition is known as dhimmitude. And dhimmis in this system are subject to a tax called jizya. A true Islamic caliphate would impose it everywhere. Remember, Islam is immutable. It's eternal, complete, and it's perfect. We must not be intimidated, and we have to have the guts to stand up for free speech and quench any attempt to stifle it. Right now, I'm probably more afraid of our government, and Mayor Carter would have us all thrown in jail if she get it her way. Every day we see the truth being turned into hate speech, like today. Orwell warned us of this. Even what I'm saying today is considered hate speech in many parts of Europe and would get me killed in some Islamic countries. Remember President Obama's infamous declaration before the UN right after Benghazi? The future must not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam. I mean, what an amazing statement. I mean, what a tool for Islam in the suppression of free speech. And this comes from the mind of our president. The First Amendment still allows me the right to speak the truth. However, right now, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC, it's the second largest organization in the world next to the United Nations, has been trying to get a UN resolution adopted, number 1618. This is a resolution that would make criticizing Islam a crime worldwide, even in the United States. Islam cannot win if we speak the truth. See how dangerous this is getting? We do not need to commit murder like Islam does to advance its objectives. All we need to do is keep our laws, practice our laws, to save our culture. That narrative, though, doesn't sit too well with the multicultural relativists of today's world of political correctness. We are not the haters. I think they are. And one other thing I'd like to do. I'd like to start an Act for America chapter in Gillette. Act for America describes itself as a nonpartisan, non-secular grassroots organization whose mission is to give Americans concerned about national security and terrorism, a powerful, organized, informed, mobilized voice. If you're anybody's interested, get with me after this, and I'll see what we can do. Currently, there's legislation that has been proposed in Congress that would designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. But you have representatives like John Conyers and other Democrats fighting to prevent its passage. This legislation would be a real blow to the Muslim Brotherhood and their ilk, like CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relationships. Groups like ACTS and others fight for these kind of laws to get passed. Now that's the good news. And here's the bad news. Can we change it? Can we turn this mentality around? Well, Mark Twain once said that it was easier to fool someone than to convince them that they'd been fooled. I've given these facts to some of the smartest people I know, and they still think that I'm wrong. I've asked them to prove me wrong. I begged them to prove me wrong. I would love nothing more than to be wrong. Truly, I would. Unfortunately, they can't, because the facts don't bear them out. Please, don't allow yourself to be counted among the legions of fools. Our nation, our very survival depends on it. Join with me in the fight. Sign up today to be part of our efforts to retake our nation and save it for ourselves, our children, and our children's children, and indeed the rest of the world. For we are the world's last and only hope at this late hour. Long live America, for those who fought and died for us. Thank you.